I'm Adelaide, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I would super appreciate it if you could subscribe. You don't have to, of course, but I would just really love it if you could. It would mean a super lot to me. We talk about ADHD, autism and everything in between, such as eating disorder content, creative content, lifestyle vlogs, arty things, makeup, just all the good stuff, all of the good stuff. And today I'm going to talk about 10 things that I wish that I knew when I started recovery. So if you didn't know, I do actually have an ebook out which is called 10 Things That I Wish I Knew When I Started Recovery. I thought that I would just go through it with you, and if you want to purchase the book, the link will be in the description. No pressure, it's £5 if you want it. If you don't want it, that's totally fine. But we're going to go through it today so that you can see if it will be helpful for you, and if not, pretty much everything that's going to be there I'm going to talk about right now anyway. So let's get into it. To start things off, tip number 1 is you do not need to look a certain way to start recovery. I know that this is such a huge deal to people who are struggling with eating disorders, that they aren't worthy of recovery unless they look a certain way, and the validation that you need to be able to start recovery. So I'm going to tell you right now, you deserve to start recovery. I do not give a hoot what you look like. I don't care what you weigh. I don't care how long you've been suffering for. I don't care. None of that is relevant. You deserve recovery, full stop. What you look like does not matter. Tip number 2 is that some days feel really easy, and this might feel like such a silly thing, but it's just the easy days are really hard because you feel like you're not struggling enough to warrant you being in recovery, so therefore you're not valid, which is ludicrous. The days that are easy should feel really good because they're easy, but they're actually sometimes harder than the hard days, because on the hard days you are giving your eating disorder the reassurance that you struggle, and then on the easy days your eating disorder's like, see, told ya, you're just not sick enough. And that can be really difficult for people in recovery. So some days do feel really easy, you are still valid, and the easy days will actually feel easy mentally eventually, I promise. Tip number 3 is to have lots of distractions. I don't need the distractions as much anymore. I do find that some days are a little bit difficult and I do need distractions to help, but for the most part I don't. However, at the beginning of my recovery, having distractions was so important and so helpful. So some distractions can include listening to your favourite music, watching a film or a TV show, creating art, so drawing, painting, doing journaling or writing stories, and being creative with your brain whilst you're eating is really helpful. I find it's really helpful to do that because you are then more focused on the creative hobby that you are doing as opposed to the food, and you'll just eat and do and not actually realise that you're eating. Tip number 4 is honestly probably the most helpful tip of all. Go out to eat with friends and family. I know that that sounds absolutely terrifying, and the first few times that you do it, it's gonna be so scary, especially now when restaurants and stuff have put damn calories on absolutely everything. It's ridiculous. The more you do that and the more that you view these interactions as social interactions, time with your friends and family, and less about the food, the easier it will become and the more into recovery you will be, if that makes sense. So much of our life is revolving around eating. Like when you pass your exams and you go out to celebrate with a meal, when you're going on a date and you go for coffee and cake, when you are sitting at home having a movie night and ordering a pizza. To anyone without an eating disorder, these just don't even seem like food things. It just seems like, oh, I'm doing this so I'm going for food. Whereas to someone with an eating disorder, we view everything with the mindset of food being the forefront and food being the main source of the entertainment, when in actual fact that's not the case. So the more that you eat out and the more that you do go out with friends and family and enjoy these interactions and talk to your friends, let them know I'm really trying in my recovery, can we go out to eat, but just ban talk of food. Like, don't want to discuss what we're eating, don't want to discuss like how many calories are in things, I don't want to discuss like what you've eaten throughout the day previous. Just go with your friends or family and have a nice time, talk about what you've been up to, talk about things that you're planning to do in the future, and have people interact with you in a way that isn't about the food that you're eating. And then when you look back on that event, you're gonna remember how funny something was that your friend said and how someone laughed so hard that Sprite came out of their nose. You're not gonna remember the pizza that came with extra slices of ham. It's just about changing the way that you view these interactions. And so going out to eat more often will help with this, but make sure that you talk to the people that you're going with, set some boundaries, set some like, these things trigger me, can we not do this, but can you help me with this? And I promise you will see such an improvement in your recovery. I wish that I started doing that earlier on in my recovery rather than waiting for the right time, because there is no right time. The right time is now. Number 5, it's okay to not like your body. Simple as that. It's okay to not like it, whether you're in recovery or not. It's okay to hate the way that you look. It is not okay to punish yourself for the way that you look. So in my book, I think this is like the biggest chapter, and I give tips and really go into a lot of detail about how to view your body in a more neutral way as opposed to a negative way. And I do think it's a really helpful chapter, and if you would like to purchase my book and read it, I would love some feedback. But yeah, I think that we put too much pressure on loving our bodies and being body positive, because that is almost impossible for people who are starting their recovery journey, because you just see your body changing and you don't like the way that it's changing because you are in the midst of an eating disorder and your main focus is on the way that you look, and it's really difficult to get past that. So I do feel like acknowledging that you don't like your body is okay, and actually saying, I don't like my body. Name things that are neutral and that are facts about your body, such as, I don't like my arms, but I do like that I'm able to carry heavy things and I am strong. I don't really like my tummy, but I do love that it protects my organs, and that the reason that it's this way is because of this. And list facts of your body as opposed to opinion. And then the more that you can do that, and the more that you view your body in a neutral way, the easier it will be to eventually have days when you do like your body. I have days where I think that I look frigging great, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so hot, yes. And then I have days where I look in the mirror and I physically sit and sob because I feel like I'm disgusting. That's just the way that I am. That's the way that I feel about my body. But I have so many more good days now than bad days, because I started viewing my body more neutral and viewing it in a less opinionated way. Tips that I'm going to give you right now that I want you to actually go away and do, if you feel like you have the capacity to do so, is list your body parts and the things that they do for you. So my arms help me carry heavy things. My stomach protects my organs. My legs help me get from here to here. And keep doing this about every single body part that you have. Every single day, I want you to look in the mirror and say something neutral about yourself and something kind every day. And the more often you do this, the easier it is to work up to saying kind things to yourself a lot more often. A really, really big tip that I find really super helpful is to take yourself on dates. Take yourself out, get dressed up, do your makeup, do your hair, do whatever you do to make yourself feel beautiful, and take yourself out. Treat yourself the way that you want someone else to treat you, and actually try to love yourself, woo yourself, like celebrate who you are and celebrate your body the same way that you would want somebody else to do it for you. That will honestly blow your mind of how much that helps. Don't take pictures of yourself and then look at them immediately after, because you are actively looking for things wrong with that picture. Leave it for a few days and then come back to it and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, and you are going to be less likely to criticize it, especially if you're out and about with friends and they've taken like candid pictures or you've taken group pictures. Do not look at them for a few days, because you're looking at the picture and looking at yourself and criticizing yourself. Whereas when you come back in a few days and look at it, you'll look at it with memories. You'll look at it with, that was such a good day. That was the day that this happened or this happened, and that was so happy. And you'll have a more positive view of the photo itself as a memory rather than a photo of you and how you're able to criticize the way that you look. Tip number 6, you are not binge eating, you are just hungry. This is something that I struggled with, as I do have issues with binge eating. So in the past, I've had binge eating disorder, bulimia and anorexia, and I often felt like I was binge eating, but I wasn't. I was just frigging hungry. If you are being held underwater and you then get let back up, you start to gasp for breath because you've been restricted of breath. So if you are restricting yourself of food, when you then allow yourself to have food, you are gonna feel like you're binging because you're just eating everything you've restricted yourself from. You're not binging, You're just hungry, and I promise that that will settle. Which goes into tip number 7, which extreme hunger isn't really that extreme. When we say we experience extreme hunger, all that means is that we just don't get satisfied from the amount of food we think is enough. More often than not, what you think is enough isn't. You've quite literally been restricting and starving your body of the nutrients it needs, so then you're feeling more hungry than you have ever been used to. Doesn't mean that this hunger is extreme, it just means that you just need a little bit of extra energy to help you get through the day. And that's not extreme. You just aren't used to feeling that hungry, so it feels extreme. And I know that it feels extreme, and it feels insatiable, and it feels like you will never feel full. I promise you that feeling goes away. Your body needs time to heal, and it needs time to regulate its hunger cues. And it can't do that if you keep restricting, because it doesn't know when it's going to get its next meal. Your body is so smart, and I promise you, the more that you actually honour your body's hunger cues, even if you think it's extreme and even if you think you've eaten too much, to honour your body. When it feels hungry, eat something. The more that you do this, the more that your body will begin to trust you again, and the quicker that this process will pass. And you will be able to have regular hunger cues that don't feel so intense. But if you start to restrict during this process and during the times when your hunger feels extreme, the process is just going to take so much longer, because your body just is never going to trust that you're going to give it what it wants when it needs it. Allow your body to feel satisfied, even if you think that it's too much. It isn't. Number 8. So this is going back to number 1, which is you do not need to look a certain way to start recovery. You do not need to look a certain way to be classed as sick enough. Anorexia is often looked at as a weight disorder by people who don't know anything about eating disorders, and even often by medical professionals. They'll see that you're not underweight and therefore won't give you the help that you are entitled to and are worthy of. And your body does not define how sick you are. You are worthy of recovery regardless. The way that your body looks does not define how sick you are, because somebody who is overweight can just as easily die from anorexia as somebody who is underweight. Your weight means absolutely nothing. You can be malnourished at any weight. Some people's bodies just will not physically go to a lower weight. That doesn't mean that they aren't suffering as much as somebody else, and that doesn't mean that they aren't worthy of recovery, because they are. Every single person who suffers with an eating disorder is worthy of recovery and the same amount of respect and love and care as anybody else. Number 9 is you are allowed to set boundaries with people, and I know that that feels really difficult and you may feel like a bother and a burden, but I promise you, you are not a bother or a burden. You're allowed to set boundaries if it helps you with your recovery, because ultimately your recovery comes first. Your health and well-being comes first. Some boundaries can include asking people not to negatively talk about food around you, so no mention of calories, no mention of foods being bad or good foods, because there is no such thing as good and bad foods. Asking people not to comment on your body, whether that is a positive comment or a negative comment. Asking people to stay away from trigger words such as "you look healthy," which was honestly the worst thing that I could hear from somebody. That was such a negative thing for me, and it is the same for a lot of people in recovery. Asking people not to comment on your food when you're eating it, and not to mention when you're eating, like, "Oh my god, you're eating, well done." That can trigger people, so make sure that you are setting boundaries that are in line with you and what is going to help you, because what is triggering for one person may not be triggering for somebody else. So make sure you do set your own boundaries and know that you're allowed to do that. And last but not least, tip number 10, which is my favourite tip, which is to write yourself a letter or make a list of fun activities you want to do or goals you want to achieve during your recovery. So the letter one I found so helpful. So I wrote myself 2 letters, and both of them were from future me to me today. One of them was as myself who had recovered, and one of them as myself who hadn't. And I wrote myself a letter from the person who hadn't recovered, and it was, "You still struggle with this, this is going wrong, this is this." And then I wrote one from me who had recovered, and it was all of these achievements, all of these great things, all of the blah blah blah. And it was just so eye-opening to what your eating disorder strips away from you and what it actually does do to you as a person and how much it isolates you, because you will not ever fully understand how much your eating disorder is isolating you until you start recovery and start realizing how miserable you were. Because you always look at your eating disorder through rose-tinted glasses and you see all of the positives, but there aren't any positives. There are literally no positives to having an eating disorder. Your eating disorder tricks you into thinking that there are. So being able to write yourself a letter from a future self who is recovered and one who isn't is an incredible way to actually visualize these things in the present moment. And you can also ask your friends and family to do the same. Like, can you write me a letter? And reading that from other people's perspective is really helpful as well, but only do that if you feel safe enough to do so and feel like it's not going to trigger you too much. Something else you can do is use a website called Future Me and write yourself a letter, and you can send it so far in advance that you'll receive it in like 5 years time, 10 years time, and write it from at the start of your recovery, and then do it so you'll receive it in a year or in 5 years or whatever. Please make sure to be realistic with the letter though. I feel like a lot of people will make the mistake of setting aspirations and goals that they may not achieve and then end up feeling really disappointed in themselves. So set realistic goals, set a realistic like expectation in the letter, and then when you receive that in a year's time or whenever you've set the date, you will see how far you've come, and it'll be such a beautiful moment to open and read that. I've sent myself a letter from last Christmas and I'm going to receive that in January next year. I do not remember what I wrote at all. ADHD, thank you. So in my book I actually do have tips on how to write a letter, and I have like different prompts for the letter as well on things to mention, things to talk about and different stuff like that. If you want to purchase my book then you can do that and you can write yourself letters using my prompts. But yeah, I hope that this was somewhat helpful. I hope that you are on your recovery journey and feeling a little bit more hopeful, and know that there are people out there who are willing to support you and help you. You deserve recovery, you deserve to eat regardless of what you ate yesterday and regardless of the things that you ate before. Your body does not define how sick you are, and you are loved no matter what you look like. You deserve recovery, and I'm so thankful and so happy that you're here and on this journey. I hope you have a super good day, and I will see you next time. Bye.